My name's Pauline Mower. I originally came to see Mr McMinn back 13 years ago. I was in a terrible state by that stage. I'd been hanging on, as I think you tend to do when it's your first hip, because you don't really want to admit that there's anything seriously wrong. I thought I had a trapped nerve. I thought I had, well, just a bit of age wearing on things, but it got quite bad. And we were living in the Isle of Man, and I had x-rays done, and they said there's nothing wrong whatsoever, just a bit of wear and tear. It's what you would expect with your age. At that age I was only 50, and I thought, well, I haven't had such a bad life, and I've done a lot of swimming, very big swimming, and a lot of walking, and general exercise, always been very healthy, and I couldn't believe why and what was happening. Anyway, I went for physiotherapy, which is what they suggested I did, and 6 weeks later I was so bad. I asked for a referral over to the UK and went to see a specialist, and just to ask him if he thought it might be my hip or what, and he did x-rays, put them up to show me, and he just said, well, what do you think's wrong here? And I pointed at the wrong hip, actually, the left one, not my right one. And I said, oh, look at that. There's a great big white lump on that round there. And he said, no, that's the good one. That's your cartilage. You haven't got any cartilage on that hip. You've got problems. You're going to have a hip replacement done. But you are a little bit on the young side, but you have options. So he told me a few options and things I could do. And he said, you'll know when it's bad. My question, how do I know when I'm going to need this? Because some days I'm not too bad, other days it just kept giving way and pain. And he said, you'll know when you can't sleep at night, when it's day and night, and when you're up all night and you're in agony and there's no way you can toss a turn anymore, you'll know. So that's how it was left, and I struggled on for 2 years, and it was the worst thing, well, more than 2 years, 2 and a bit years, it was the worst thing I could ever have done. Because by that stage I was taking cocodamols every day, a lot. I was taking Voltarols, which masked the pain, and I kept on, and it got so bad, as predicted, at night. But I was really worried about the fact that at this stage I was still only like 52, 53, that age range, and I was still concerned in case I might need a second hip replacement operation, you know, if I was fortunate enough to live a long life. And I was talking to a friend of ours, and his sister and her husband are both top surgeons in a hospital in the United Kingdom, and he said, have a word with John and his sister Jane. He said, have a word with them. They might be able to just, you know, alleviate a lot of your worries. So I got on to them, and he said, if you want my advice, there's one person you can go to. And at your age, there's one person you can go to. Try the Birmingham hip operation with Mr McMinn. And it was like somebody telling me, what on earth, the Birmingham hip operation? Why is that different? And he explained it all, and he said it's, generally speaking, as a lot of younger people have it done, that might have to have extra surgery at a much later date, and you can always have a total hip replacement done later on in your lifetime if need be, whereas it is difficult to do a second total hip replacement. And he has some marvellous results. So we went online, my husband and I, researched it all, found out about Mr McMinn, found about what it was, and very quickly we got an appointment, came down, and by that stage he took one look at it and he said, I honestly don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, because you've done an awful lot of damage to the actual socket, the ball and socket. The actual socket was starting to disintegrate because I'd been taking so many anti-inflammatories which had caused the problem. So he said, I promise you I'll do it if I can. And he said, are you still taking the Voltarols? And I said, yes. So he said, right, you stop now, and it will take 5 weeks to get out of your body. And he said, once it's out of your body, I will operate the next day. So I had to go cold turkey. It was terrible, but I stopped that. I could keep on with the cocodamols, the paracetamols, that wasn't a problem, but it didn't do much for me at that stage. And I just lasted, that was it. I just existed for 5 weeks. And then I came in, and that was the 4th of March, 13 years ago. And I had the Birmingham hip operation done, and I can honestly say it just sort of saved my life. I mean, initially, the first day or two, I was in almost a week then, a lot longer than the second one, but they kept you in for that length of time. But by the time I came to going home, I can remember the day after I went home, we went out for a meal in a restaurant. And the only thing, I went on crutches and took a pillow to sit on because I was a little bit uncomfy. And I knew they had hard chairs where we were going, but I had a meal. And from then on in, it was just, as the book said, and as Mr McMinn sent me home with the literature, by this stage you should be doing this, by this stage try and be doing that, do these exercises. I did every single exercise as I should, and touch wood, it was brilliant. Right, so I've had 13 really good years with the right hip, and I can honestly say no problems whatsoever. Nothing, no problems. I've been able to swim, I've been able to do everything I wanted to do, which is why it came as such a shock for the left hip to suddenly go. Mr McMinn, first time round, did actually say, he took, when the x-rays were taken, that my right hip was terrible, but my left hip would need doing sooner rather than later. Those were his words. And I've waited and waited, and I've had no problems with the left. And it's gone on and on and on, and 13 years. And then this September, just gone, 2016, suddenly I felt as if I'd trapped something in the groin. Now, the last one was all down the back of my leg, and they thought initially it was in the sciatic nerve. I think that was what it was. So this was a different pain, totally different pain, far more debilitating in that it was came on very, very quickly. I didn't have good days. There was nothing, and then it was there. There was no waiting 2 years to go and see a specialist. There was no waiting for doing any physio or anything. And it really frightened me, because I thought, goodness gracious, why has it come on so quickly? This just doesn't feel right. And there didn't seem to be any pain in the hip joint itself, which there was in the right one eventually. But I had quite a bit of pain round about my ankle. And I thought, goodness, don't tell me my ankle's going, and the hip and the groin. And I thought I perhaps trapped a nerve again. I thought, it's a nerve, it's a nerve. But then everybody started telling me, Pauline, you're limping. Why are you limping so bad? And they were thinking it was my other hip. Has something gone wrong with your hip? No, it's not that one, it's the other one. And eventually, well, not eventually, I just said to my husband, I've got to get this sorted out. And he said, this is ridiculous. We went away on holiday on a cruise, and I could barely walk. And I hadn't got a stick or anything. But it was a real struggle. I was having to think of, I hope I can get in the lift, because there's no way I can go up the stairs, which isn't me. On cruises, we walk up and down all the stairs, and I just couldn't do it. And everywhere I went, I was looking for somewhere to sit. And so this was the main difference. And we got an appointment very, very quickly, just before Christmas, with Mr McMinn again, because I always said, if it needs doing, I'm going to go back to Edgbaston and see him. And he took the x-rays, and he said, well, it's nowhere near as bad as the first one. You haven't damaged anything, which is a good thing. I hadn't been taking Voltarol or anti-inflammatories at all, so nothing was damaged. And he said, I can do it, but it is a new operation now, you do realise. And I must admit, blissful ignorance, I just thought I was going to have the duplicate. I thought, I'm going to have exactly the same as I did before. And he explained all about it, how it's the new Custom Polyethylene Resurfacing done this time. He explained about all the work he'd done to develop this new resurfacing. And I thought, well, I don't know anything more about it, but it was a relatively new operation, when you did this one, it was probably, I think, about 7 years old. 7 years they'd been doing it. So I was quite early on in the first hip resurfacing operation. So I thought, well, I'm going to go with you anyway, and my husband agreed. So we said, yes, when can you do it? So we booked it for the 17th of January, which is exactly 7 weeks ago to today. I've just come back to have x-rays taken and hopefully be discharged. As far as the two are concerned, the recuperation has been really very, very similar. I didn't know if it would feel any different. It doesn't. I didn't know if I'd meet the milestones of the recuperation and the exercises, because on the first one they give you a booklet with all the exercises in, and you know exactly what stage you're aiming for at each week. Try and do this, try and do that, try and increase to this number. And it was the same. There were more exercises this time. The booklet was far more developed. It was excellent, it really is. And in fact, I've just started swimming now, which Mr McMinn wants you to do at 6 weeks, and I've just started that. And this time I'm going to a hydrotherapy pool in Southport, near where we live. And so it's run by the physiotherapists, and I've got 3 treatments for that, where we're just doing general exercises, and lo and behold, they're the identical ones I'm doing in the house every day. So I'm feeling really good because I can do them really easily, and in the water they're even easier, so that's better, that's good. And I've only just started that last week, and at the end of the actual exercise sessions with the physios, she said if you feel like having a swim, you can do. And Mr McMinn loves you swimming from 6 weeks on, particularly breaststroke, which sounds horrendous when you think about it, in a hip socket and joint, and you're doing breaststroke leg kick, but it's surprising how it loosens the whole hip joint up, and you really feel. And from last week to this week, so from week 6 to week 7, it's just been really, really wonderful, the improvement I've made again. And I'm doing just about everything that I could possibly want to do. I think I can sum everything up for anybody watching this in pain or worried about something and considering perhaps I might need to go to the next step. Oh, no, I won't. I'll leave it a little bit longer. Don't. From the first time with my first hip, basically I left it almost 4 years from first seeing the X-ray, having an X-ray, to actually having the operation, and it was the worst thing I could have done. I should have come there a lot sooner. The problem being is you don't want to admit it. Second time, as Mr McMinn said when I came to see him just before Christmas 2016, a few months ago, I'm glad to see you haven't made the mistake that you did last time and you've come straight away. It will be a lot better, and I can tell you now I can do this operation, because with the first one, until I came round from the operation, the first words I said was, could you do your operation, Mr McMinn, or did I have to have a total hip replacement? And he said, no, I managed. And that was a great relief. I knew this time, he said there would be no problem. And I think that's the one bit of advice, never leave it. And I must admit, all my friends, all my relatives, everybody knows now that if they've got any problems, I think the one and only place to come to is to see Mr McMinn, because it's just been brilliant. It really has. It's just changed my life completely. And I can't wait now. In a week, 2 weeks time, we're off on a nice long holiday, and we're going long haul distance towards the end of this summer, and we just can't wait. So got my life back again. Thank you, Mr McMinn.